Iechyd a Gofal Digidol Cymru. Good morning and welcome to the Audit and Assurance Committee here at Digital Healthcare Wales. And a special welcome this morning to Ivan Evans. Croeso Ivan. Ivan is Executive Director of Strategy, who's responding to the Service Continuity Audit Review. To Andrew Doughton and Mike Whitley from Audit Wales, presenting the Audit Wales update. And to Samantha Morgan, Director of People and OD, who'll join us for the Staff Culture and Wellbeing Advisory Review. And we'll also be welcoming Steve Betty, who's presenting the Counter-Fraud Progress Update and the draft Counter-Fraud Work Plan for 26-27. Now we have a full agenda this morning, and in the interest of time, I suggest you introduce yourselves as and when required. And we are holding this meeting virtually via MS Teams. The committee is being recorded and the recording will be posted on DHCW's website. Now, we are planning to finish the public session in or around 12 o'clock at the latest, with a short break before our private session starts at 12:15. But there will be a short comfort break between sections 4 and 5 of today's agenda. And we'll start then with apologies for absence. I have apologies from Laura Tolley, Head of Corporate Governance and Deputy Board Secretary, from Henry Bales, Head of Cardiff and Vale Counter Fraud, with Steve Betty deputising, and apologies from Nathan Couch of Audit Wales. Can I check whether there are any declarations of interest on today's agenda? No, I can't see any, so if that's the case then, we'll move forward to part 2 and the consent agenda. You will have plenty of time to have read the papers under part 2, which we're intending to use in order to focus on business critical activity. So I'd like to just check if you're happy that if you're happy with the consent agenda, or is there anything on that agenda you would wish to move for a wider discussion? I can't see any hands up, so I conclude, therefore, that committee members are happy to approve and note all items as outlined. So specifically, we are approving the minutes, item 2.1, from the committee meetings held on January the 20th, both public and private abridged minutes. We are noting the NHS Wales Shared Services Partnership Committee Assurance Report, that's item 2.2. We are noting the contents of the Forward Work Plan, item 2.3, including items scheduled to come to future committee meetings. We are noting the Standards of Behaviour Report, item 2.4, and noting the Legislative Assurance Register, item 2.5. We are noting the Quality and Regulatory Compliance Update Report, that's item 2.6, and noting the Estates Decarbonisation and Compliance Report, item 2.7 for assurance. Thank you. We will then move on to the main agenda. And this is part 3, and we'll begin with the action log. You'll see from your papers that there are just one action captured from the committee meeting held on January the 20th, which is now complete. So we are noting the status of the action log, which I'm sure we're happy to do so. Diolch yn fawr gyfeillion. Symud ni rwan ymlaen I ran 4. We'll now move on to part 4 and to the audit and counter fraud section. It's my pleasure now to hand over to Stephen Cheney, who's Head of Internal Audit at NHS Wales Shared Services Partnership, to go through the Internal Audit Progress Report, which also includes the draft Head of Internal Audit Opinion, which we're being asked to note. Diolch, Stephen. Croeso.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. We have now completed our audit work and issued everything in draft, so a bit ahead compared to recent years. Most of the audit reports have been finalised. We do still have one that's going through the finalisation process and another one which is due to be released shortly. But for intents and purposes, we have completed our audit work for the year. Later on within the agenda is next year's plan as well. Now, our intention is to move onto that plan as quickly as possible to give ourselves a swift start to 26-27 as well. So with regards to the progress report, we have completed quite a lot of our plan. There are a couple of changes which require notification and approval on a couple of the last audits that were scheduled for 25-26. The first one is the Welsh Intensive Care Information Programme. We've issued a draft report for that, and whilst we intended to provide an assurance rating, upon conclusion of the audit, quite a number of matters were outside of the remit of DHCW, and it would have been difficult to provide assurance against those matters when actions require ongoing engagement with other organisations, not least because the number of participants involved with the programme has reduced from all organisations down. So because of that change and the findings, considerations that we have included, it has changed the scope somewhat. That being said, as it stands currently, we have raised findings and provided priority ratings for the matters arising relating to DHCW. It's just the assurance rating would be a difficult one to include because of the considerable overlap external to DHCW. So that's the first change I want to make you aware of, and just seek approval or agreement for that change. I'll pause there just to see if there are any questions or concerns with that approach, if I may.
Okay, so your request then is that the committee approves the change of approach for the Welsh Intensive Care Information Programme review. Any questions, comments, colleagues? No, I think you've made it pretty clear then, Stephen, the reasons for that, and it makes perfect sense. So we are, as a committee, happy to approve that change in approach then. Diolch.
Thank you very much, Chair. The second update relates to LIMS 2. The committee may recall that we initially scheduled this work for earlier in the year, and we deferred it into Q4 because the timing and the appropriateness of completing that work. We sought to commence it this quarter as planned. But again, because of the ongoing discussions with other NHS Wales organisations, the current position of it, it's not in a position at this point in time to start that work. Coupled with that, there's a great deal of other work that's underway, which is conflicting with priorities within the service area. So we propose still doing the work, but within 26-27, and in anticipation of that, audit number 9 within the draft plan reflects that position. So still very much the same review, although we have flexibility to tweak and update that, which we have done. So it will not be lost. It's just at this time, we could do the work, but it would be probably a lesser quality piece as a result. So that's the second approval.
Okay, well, the ask again is then to defer the audit on the LIM 2.0 to the first quarter, I believe. Stephen, how confident are you that you will deliver it in the first quarter of 26-27 as per your plan?
Actually, we're considering Q3, so it gives quite a substantial amount of time to be able to pick it up.
Okay. We have a couple of questions, and I'll take Alistair first and then Ivan. Diolch. Alistair.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Stephen. Really, just to ask, it's all very well as deferring it, and I'll support doing that for the practical reason that you're not able to progress it. But does that not squeeze out more of your potential planned work for the year ahead in such a way that could, in some way, be unhelpful to us? I just wanted to check out what the displacement might be. Thanks.
Thank you, Alistair. No, there's no impact on our proposed work. Our IT audit team will be completing the assignment. So it's an additional piece of work to what we were planning to include within 26-27. So whilst it is an additional piece of work, the burden falls onto our IT audit team, which are they're appropriately resourced to pick it up. So there shouldn't be any impact in that sense, and there's no dilution of the plan as a result either. I hope that helps.
Diolch, Stephen. And Ifan, diolch.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Marian. Ifan Evans, Cyfarwyddwr Strategol, Ifan Evans, Executive Director of Strategy. We've worked very closely with Stephen and with his team to try to get the timing right on audit. As members will know, we have a rolling programme of internal audit looking at our major strategic programmes. Many of them have quite complex governance and decision-making arrangements, and many of them have been, let's say, in flight over the last 12 months or so and are moving around quite a bit. WCIS has been paused for some time, and LIMS is in its final stages and should complete implementation to its current plan by the late summer, which is why we've moved to Q3 so that we can review at the end of that programme as part of our programme closure discipline. I just want to reassure members and anybody who's watching, internal audit is one of our assurance mechanisms, but a couple of years ago we established the Programmes Delivery Committee, which also reports the status of these programmes in public, and at the next Programmes Delivery Committee coming up in about a month or so, there will be the annual report for LIMS and for WCIS and also for the RISP programme, three of our most complex programmes probably. And on top of that, obviously, we have an internal reporting mechanism on a monthly basis to Welsh Government and to the major peer groups and to the new digital governance arrangements. So we are working very closely with internal audit to try to find the right time. But when things are moving around all the time and when there are many decision makers involved in a very complex programme governance, it can be sometimes quite difficult. And maybe we'll get a chance to talk about this later, but I know Audit Wales I think Audit Wales are coming to the end of their digital transformation review, and this touches on those same matters and frames some of the challenges that the whole system is facing in terms of major collaborative digital programme delivery.
Yeah. Thank you, Ian. That's really helpful, and it does in fact touch very, very clearly on the Audit Wales work as well. So I'm sure we'll come back to the wider issue when we come to that agenda item, if I may. And Chris.
Diolch, Marian. Chris Darling, Director of Corporate Affairs and Board Secretary at DHCW. Yeah, it was just to make the point, we are escalated for major digital programmes, and these two programmes that Stephen's run through are within the scope of our escalation criteria. So I think really important that when we do get the feedback, it was done at the right time to ensure maximum learning. And I think the WCIS, the intensive care programme in particular, given the external dependencies, I think it's helpful for us to make sure we maximise the learning that is pushed back a bit.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris. So I think from what we've heard, I can conclude that colleagues are happy then to approve the deferral of LIMS 2.0 due to the progress that is still required. So thank you for that. And if you'll take us on to your update report then, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just one last minute point I'd like to raise. We have another report that we are discussing in the private session as well, and my colleague Martin was due to attend. Unfortunately, he's ill today, so I shall pick that up in his absence. So I just thought I'd mention that. Finally, with regards to the progress update, we have drafted our Head of Internal Audit opinion. It's a review of all audit work completed throughout the year, an assessment of risk. I have included the very first draft of the report as well, which is naturally subject to change, but it is looking as if it will be reasonable assurance. It's based on the arrangements to secure governance, risk management, and internal control within the areas under review. There are some matters that require management attention, which is the findings, key findings that we identify on each of the reviews. And we have theme analysis of some of the key points coming out across all of the audits and indeed across the whole of Wales. So it's information we'll be looking to share as well upon conclusion. So it's a initial position, but the current position based on the volume of work completed to date. So that concludes my progress update. Very happy to take any more questions.
Thank you, Stephen. That's very clear and pleasing to note that at this stage, the proposed opinion is one of reasonable assurance. That's a pleasing position to be in. I can't see any hands up, Stephen, so we will note then the internal audit, the draft head of internal audit opinion, and ask you to take us through the 3 audit reports which are for review at this committee, beginning with the service continuity review then. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this audit concluded reasonable assurance, and we reviewed the service continuity planning in quite a level of detail. We generally found the core processes operating as intended, and indeed compared to other clients, probably more mature and advanced as well. Typically, we don't see a huge amount of continuity planning or testing other than on a larger scale across other clients, but with DHW at the service level, there are testing, or there is testing taking place on a regular basis. That being said, we did raise a matter around the level of testing and the degree of compliance there, but it was pleasing to see the testing was taking place. There was some good practice as well. iPassport is used to store continuity plans for remote access. The plans that we sampled were up to date and compliant with the policy. Power BI is used to monitor testing arrangements in real time. And there was a completion of a self-assessment against ISO 22301 as well. And all of that is underpinned by a training program too. However, whilst plans are in place and up to date and supported by governance and training arrangements, as I said, we found sort of gaps within testing, some inconsistent business impact assessments, and limited training uptake as well. But overall, a positive position, some areas to tighten up on, but certainly positive overall. I should pause there and invite any questions.
Thank you, Stephen, and I'll turn to Ivan Evans, our Executive Director of Strategy, who I know wants to respond to those findings with management actions and to the recommendations. Ivan.
Diolch, Marian, and diolch about Stephen as well, and to his team. As he said, it was a detailed review. I think it was an important milestone for us to have this review. DHW was escalated to Category 1 as a responder under civil contingencies around about 2 years ago, I think, or about at some point in 2024. I'm not sure the exact date. And through 2025, we've used our existing governance, our assurance, the Digital Governance and Safety Committee, ISO standards, and also a quality audit review to improve our position on that. And we've also employed we've appointed a new business continuity planning lead who's brought, I think, fair to say, a detailed and methodical approach to this, which is what we really need. I'm very pleased with the reasonable assurance. There are a number of management actions, 7 actions, I think, against 4 different headings. People can read the report online, so I won't go through those in detail. I'll just pull out a bit of a flavour of them, as Stephen said. Some of them are around timetables, time expiry. Some of them are around training. Some of them are around sort of testing escalation progress. I think thematically, on a more strategic basis, the one that I'd draw out for attention is the need for us in DHCW to distinguish between business continuity for the organisation and business continuity for the services that we provide across NHS Wales. We're continuing to work on that. We're running a dedicated half day next week, I think, as a Kaizen event, a Kaizen structured event, to look at how that relationship works, so that we're comfortable that it's as good as it can be. The final thing, and I just want to pay credit to the audit team on this, I was really pleased to see the at a glance section and some positive achievements that are identified. My thinking on audit, and I've had these conversations with Stephen and with his team a number of times, have evolved quite a lot in the last decade or so, from experience in arm's length bodies in Welsh Government and in DHCW. And I think audit colleagues occupy a very valuable position in that they can look across all organisations and they can compare and contrast in ways that we can't do as individual organisations. And I know Audit Wales have done a lot in their lessons learned efforts. And I've wanted to work with audit colleagues and teams to where there are positive achievements, to highlight some of those so that they can be shared and played into the wider system. So I'm really pleased on this to see that additional page, which is in the report, giving a little bit of the sort of the general context, but calling out some of the positive achievements that Stephen has mentioned. You know, I'm not saying that they outweigh all the tasks and the actions. And the actions are very tightly timetabled. It's very much Sally's personality. It's not the end of the month, but it's a specific date. And I've got a reasonable level of confidence that we will achieve those based on what we've been achieving over the last year or so. So I really welcome the report. It's a really important marker for us in terms of our efforts to be as tight as we can possibly be on business continuity and our planning arrangements. It complements other things that we're doing. I'm very grateful to Stephen and the team for the work that they've done on this.
Diolch, Ivan. As you say, an important milestone and positive to see that reasonable assurance. Can I just pick out one headline from your summary, which was that overall engagement with business continuity processes is limited. Ivan, could you just sort of expand a little on that? I mean, clearly there are a suite of recommendations and management actions. How would you consider the HCW in the context of the NHS family in terms of this specific issue? Are we an outlier, or is this a common issue for health boards across Wales?
Well, it's very hard for me to comment on that, Marion, honestly, because I don't see into the business continuity arrangements in other NHS Wales organisations, other than occasionally, for example, in the last month or two, Welsh Government have asked for additional assurance on laboratory diagnostics on limbs. As the timetable slips for the limbs replacement, what business continuity arrangements do health organisations have in place if they lost their digital systems, that is. But we're not directly cited on that, which comes back to the point about internal audit being cited. And I think it is a challenge. A lot of our emphasis has been on documented process. And if you read the report, you'll see things around, you know, action cards which simplify the documented process. But there is no substitute for rehearsal. Practice until you get it right, and keep practicing until you can't get it wrong. And we have stepped up inside DHCW. We've tried to do that. That's much easier to do in an organisation that our size than it is in an organisation of 15 to 20,000 people. You can't freeze, you know, all healthcare services. So I think health boards do face very, very different challenges to us. We can operate as a hybrid organisation from the organisational business continuity perspective. Health boards can't maintain health services from a hybrid perspective. So I think it's a very different landscape, and not one really. It's a very long way of saying that I can't really comment on where our health boards are, other than in the digital continuity as it relates to programmes when those programmes are in flight.
Yeah, Stephen, do you want to come in on that point with your knowledge cross-sector?
Thank you. I think Ivan covers the majority of it off, really, in that with the testing we do elsewhere. Typically, as I mentioned, the dry runs that should be completed are not. Some of it is due to time pressures, but also ability to engage across a large group. However, we would still expect to see that happening, because at the very least at a team level, whether it's 10, 20, 30 people, you can identify some of the key continuity events that are likely to happen, whether loss of premises, loss of power, and work through that. And you can do it relatively quickly. And just as an example, there was a continuity event here a couple of weeks ago, actually, at Mymiled, and there were quite a number of things that came out of that for us that should have been picked up at the time. So until you go through an actual event or a dry run, it's very difficult to identify all of the gaps, and that's why it is so important. It's worth mentioning about the action cards that Ivan touched on as well. That's an area that we do see that's a bit more mature in other organisations. So the step-by-step instructions, not all organisations, of course, and there's still gaps, because it does give a simple set of steps to follow if premises were out of action or power had gone off. So that's an area, I think, and I know it's been developed now with the change of personnel. Quite a lot of work's been done in that area. That's probably a key area to focus on, alongside the sort of periodic testing, whether it's once a year, once every 6 months, 18 months, whatever. But that's definitely an area to focus on as an organisation. I think there's a lot more control there, but it certainly is more difficult. At least that's the reason provided to us. Quite often it's just pressures within patient-facing services. So I don't know if that answers the question, Marianne, but very happy to carry on.
I think you did a good stab at it. Thank you. I can see Alistair has his hand up. So Alistair, your question or contribution, please.
Thanks, Marianne. And yeah, like Ivan, I grew to love internal audit. I grew to fully value in internal audit over the years as well. So thank you very much, Stephen. And I also think it's really invaluable to have constructive points, which just allow us to examine, where we could keep improving. So really welcome it. Your comment around unclear distinction between business and IT service continuity. I'm not trying to overread into that. You're making a comment about the distinction. I just wondered if you could clarify, does it indicate that there is a weakness in one or the other, or simply a lack of distinctiveness in the way that we approach the continuity challenges of business and IT? Yeah. I just wanted that clarification, Stephen. Thank you.
Thank you. You're correct. It's just a lack of distinction rather than a particular weakness. Otherwise, we would have raised quite a significant point. Probably a couple of things to mention. One is the difference between disaster recovery and business continuity, but also the role that DHCW may play within disaster recovery across the whole of Wales as well, with other NHS Wales organisations. So there's almost 3 strands to it with DHCW compared to other organisations. But yes, it's the awareness point more so.
Diolch yn fawr. So thank you. We are receiving the service continuity planning audit for assurance, and pleasing again to note a reasonable assurance. Let's move on to the second audit then, which is the follow-up on audit recommendations. Stephen.
Thank you. So this follow-up work is an annual piece of work that we complete. Slightly different this year compared to previous years in that we have not provided an assurance opinion. And you may recall that I discussed on occasion about the new global internal audit standards that came in last year, well, from the start of 25-26. And it prompted a review of certain work that we did because of the requirements of the standard. And this was one of those pieces. So to ensure a standard approach across the whole of Wales, we adopted very much similar tests in a bit more detail, a higher samples selection, but without an assurance rating. However, saying that, even without the rating, it is a positive position. So we looked at 3 aspects in particular. The the accuracy and effectiveness of the tracker itself, which is good. The approval of deadline extensions for management actions, which is also good, but DHCW tend to close out their actions promptly and on time anyway. And finally, where actions are closed at a very high level, we review evidence to support the closure of a sample of those actions. So we do provide a degree of comfort that they're not just being closed off freely. That being said, whilst it is a good process, it's operating well, it's accurate and complete, there is maybe some reflection around the closures, some of the management actions, just to ensure that they are closed off at an appropriate time and ideally with support and evidence. And whilst the responsibility sits with the action owner, to take it a step further, I think just provision of some evidence support in the closure would help ensure it's closed at an appropriate time. It's certainly not a big issue or a gap from our perspective. It's just that we've done work in some of these areas that had actions open, and we've been able to test them in more detail this year. But overall, it is a very good process. It's working effectively, and just a couple more steps to strengthen it a bit more as well would help. So welcome any comments.
Thank you, Stephen. I'll turn now to our Board Secretary, Chris Darling, to any comments that you might want to make. It is an advisory as opposed to an overall assurance rating audit. So your comments, please, Chris.
Yeah, and it's a follow-up, isn't it? So I think the original audit 18 months, 24 months ago is incredibly helpful. I think we've taken on board some of the recommendations. Then not a lot really to comment other than to say, we fully take on board where the audit has identified areas that we could potentially enhance processes. We'll be doing that going forward. But I think overall, I was quite content with the findings and the recommendations.
Thank you, Chris. So we are receiving the follow-up audit recommendations for assurance. We'll move on to the third audit before this committee meeting, which is the sustainable funding, the Digital Priorities Investment Fund. Stephen.
Thank you. Thank you again, Chair. So with this review, which was rated reasonable assurance, we focused on two main aspects: the measures in place at DHCW to ensure ongoing financial sustainability, and whether a sample of the budgetary control management arrangements were being adhered to. So it's a bit of a hybrid review. We focused on sustainability and adherence to the budget policy as well. Overall, no significant issues. A couple of findings. First one is, I guess, more of a minor medium, if you wish. It's sort of just ensuring reconciliations against the remit letter milestones are captured. We found a couple of gaps there, but it was more of an administrative point than anything else, hence why that objective is substantial overall. However, for the second medium, that is more of an impact, and thus that objective is reasonable assurance. Under the budgetary control policy, there is a requirement for budget holders to formally accept their delegated budget. It's not prescribed, but it's typically in the form of sort of a delegation letter, though as I said, that tends to be reserved for the higher tier of budget holders. At a service level, it's just a formal acceptance, and we saw some emailed acceptance within the sample that we looked at. We didn't have a particular issue with that. However, for some of the cost centres, there was no evidence of formal acceptance. We did observe that a meeting took place discussing budget allocations and for each of the cost centres, so it may be that it was picked up within that forum. We just didn't have any evidence either way that was the case. But yeah, other than that point, it was a positive report overall again. So welcome any questions.
Thank you, Stephen. Perhaps I'll turn to Chris Morton, our Interim Director of Finance, to respond to the findings. Chris, if I may.
Yeah, thank you, Marion. Thanks, Steve, for the overview. I think, again, in terms of just covering the findings, I think we recognise those, but also that actually I think we've got some strong foundations to build upon as we go into the next year here. Again, it's a couple of areas that we'll need to work on just to make sure we continue to improve and tighten up those areas. But I think it's worth noting again that last year with the DPIF funding, it was the first time that we had been given the authority to via budgets and be more flexible in that process. And we implemented a financial control around that budget variant process. And again, there was no issues at all in terms of how we've managed that, and we've reported that transparently, and I think that that's something that's worked well and we'll continue to build upon. And I think again overall, just thanks to Steve and the team for the work that's been done on this, but also to our finance team, Sian in particular, and the PMO teams as well, who've all supported in responding to requests for information, where the first quarter of this year has been incredibly busy for the teams with the other things we've had going on, Public Accounts Committee preparation, etc. So again, this has been work that's been on top of other work as well. So again, just thanks to all the teams involved in this report.
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you, Chris, for your response. Ivan.
Diolch, Marion. I'll just add some comments because one of the first key findings relates to an action which sits with Michelle Seld, who's in my directorate, and it relates particularly to IMTP and remit letter reconciliation. So we went through a process last year of reconciling the remit letter against the IMTP in the first quarter, and we're aiming to do that more quickly this time around. We updated the SHA board a fortnight ago when the IMTP was considered by the DHW board, and we met with Welsh Government last week to look for reconciliation between the remit letter and the IMTP. I want to flag that the remit letter, I think we're moving into a much more agile and flexible and responsive environment for the way that programs are funded. Historically, originally, the DPIF was on a 3 or more year funding letter per program, which would effectively lock in the funding against a business case formally assessed by Welsh Government. In 24 and 2025, that formal assessment process, the Strategic Investment Panel, was stood down, and from the beginning of last year, 25-26, in March 2025, we moved to a portfolio funding model, as Chris just described, where all of the programs are funded through one block through a National Priorities Fund. This year, we're being, we, meaning ourselves and Welsh Government, are being super agile because there is a pause and review process for the Digital Priorities Investment Fund, as it is still commonly called, although it was the NPF in the National Priorities Funding, I think it was called in the remit letter. So that funding has been excluded from the remit letter, and on that basis, the board were not able to formally approve the SHA for submission. So it's been it continues to be a challenge for us. I know Welsh Government is moving quickly through that review process. We hope that'll come to a conclusion soon to give us the certainty that we need, or at least the framework and the framing that we need in order to manage, whether at a portfolio or an individual programme level. And we'll respond as quickly as we can to Welsh Government expectations and requirements in that area. So I think overall that agility and flexibility is valuable. We've always needed to move money from one programme to the next, depending on delivery. In the previous environment, it was a clunky mechanism by which a programme would return money to Welsh Government and Welsh Government would reallocate it out to another programme. I think we want to move to a portfolio management arrangement working closely with Welsh Government. So we'll see how the review plays out over the next few weeks, and then that'll give us hopefully a solid platform through 26-27 for portfolio management of these very important major programmes.
Diolch Ivan, thank you for those observations. And of course, the remit letter comes for noting later on the agenda, and I'm sure we'll come back to it in our discussion with Audit Wales in a few minutes. So just to be clear, we are still, as an organisation, awaiting clarification from Welsh Government in terms of the National Priorities Fund, as it's now called.
For this year, well, I've been on leave as it happens, Marianne, but today's my first day back. But
Okay.
I'm not aware that we've had anything, and the review of the DPIF is still ongoing. We've been working with them over the Easter weekend, and we're aiming to return some information, I think, by close today. I can see Chris nodding, which was requested last week. So I just want to emphasise, how quickly teams are working as quickly as they possibly can to respond to the review, so that we can all, meaning the whole of the NHS family, because other organisations also receive DPIF funding, not just DHCW, and the review covers the whole of the DPIF, not just the DHCW elements. In fact, probably we have less than half of the DPIF coming through DHCW. And a large proportion, a significant proportion, almost a quarter of the money that we receive, we disperse onwards to health boards through programs. So obviously they're very soon going to be asking us, where's our money? We will say, well, we haven't had it yet. So obviously we all want to work collaboratively across the system to get through that process as quickly as we can.
Diolch yn fawr, Ifan. Thank you for that. If there aren't any further questions or comments, then thank you for the Sustainable Funding Review, which has a rating of reasonable assurance. Again, pleasing to note that. And the committee is being asked to receive this report also for assurance, which we are happy to do so. Diolch yn fawr. Let's move then for the last part of your contribution, Stephen, then, which is the internal audit draft work plan for 26-27. Diolch.
Thank you again, Chair. So this is the draft plan for 26-27 for committee's approval. It's probably worth mentioning that the plan's never set in stone. We're very fluid with our work, and we can move things around, pick up new reviews, etc. So it's not a definitive position overall. This year we've considered quite a number of additional aspects and areas of risk as well to incorporate within the plan, which you may recognise some of the points. Overall, we take into account DHCW's strategic objectives, the missions, the risks that the organisation is facing, Welsh Government priorities and contents of whether it be the remit letter or public accountability meetings. So some of their areas of progress that they wish to see. And we sort of put it all together, analyse it, and against the number of audit days that we have, we create almost like a top 20, top 30 list of key risks and challenges. The escalation level plays a part within or feature of our planning as well. And we are intending to complete a national piece of work around sustainable funding going forward too. So that also features. There are well, actually quite a number of digital audits covering key priorities. And I don't wish to go through each of them, but it's probably worth pulling out one or two. The NHS Wales app, we are keen to look at that, and the ramping up of user adoption targets as one example. The Microsoft contract as well, not just from the perspective of agreeing the contract going forward, but contingency arrangements in the event of non-agreement. And indeed, if there is an agreement this time around, contingency arrangements for the next time it's to be renewed. So some sort of medium to longer term horizon scanning as well. And as I mentioned, number 9 is LIMS as well, to take into account that deferral. The non-digital audits cover a range of domains from corporate governance, financial and operational as well. And in reality, there are so many more audits we would like to do as well, but we sort of reflect upon work completed in recent years and try to ensure an even coverage across all areas of the organisation whilst taking into account risk. So yes, a bit of a summary of how we've prepared it, and very happy to take any questions at all.
Thank you, Stephen. And of course, independent members, myself, as well as colleagues, have been involved in early discussions in the formulation of this plan, which we're being asked to receive as a draft plan today in advance of its final sign-off. Chris Darling, Board Secretary.
Thank you, Marion. Yeah, I think the plan looks good in terms of the areas it's proposing to cover. It's hard to cover everything, isn't it? But I take comfort from the approach being taken in terms of risk-based approach. Just a question for Steve around capacity. In previous years, we have taken advantage of additional built-in capacities to do some audit work the committee have asked for in year. So it's just a question of whether that would be possible again, should there be anything that was identified by the committee during the year that's not included in the plan as it is now.
Thank you, Chris. We factor in some contingency time, and this year it's equivalent to 1 to 2 additional reviews as well. In recent years, we've absorbed that within larger scale reviews where we've spent more time than originally planned, but typically we certainly have time for at least 1 additional review and possibly 2 as well. So. Yeah.
Is that over and above the LIMS 2.0 that we have deferred to this year? So just to be clear.
Yes, absolutely. We have a good allocation for each audit. Some audits take longer than we planned, so time is lost there, but we tend or try to factor that into the calculation as much as possible. So there's the plan, there's LIMS on top, and then another 1 or 2 reviews, which some of that will invariably be, as I said, used for more complex audits or more difficult audits that we encounter through the year. But certainly at this point in time, we have capacity, yes.
Thank you. I can't see any hands up, so I think that's a reflection of the fact that the plan does very much reflect our aspirations as well as the strategic priorities of the organisation. We have been heavily involved, and I think this final draft plan reflects very, very clearly all the things that we were keen to prioritise in this financial year. So thank you for your work in developing this plan, which we are happy to receive this morning. But also, can I just take this opportunity to thank you for all your work on the internal audits over the past year. I think from all the comments that you've heard this morning, I think we're all very, very clear on the benefits and the dividends that the internal audit play into our ability to perform well and effectively within the wider NHS family. They're really invaluable. So thank you again for your work, and we look forward to working with you for this new financial year. Diolch yn fawr, Stephen, and also to the wider team. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate that.
Diolch yn fawr. Felly symudan ni mlaen I ran nesa'r adran hon. We'll move on to the Audit Wales Committee update, which includes the draft audit plan for 26-27. And I'll now invite Andrew Doughton and Mike Whitley to present these papers and along with the audit plan to follow. So over to you. Diolch yn fawr. Croeso.
By that, Mike, did you want to start on the financial audit on the update?
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Chair. Just by way of introduction, Mike Whiteley, Audit Manager for Audit Wales. I cover the audit of the financial statements and the other kind of associated areas, and Andrew Doughton's the audit manager who covers off our performance work. Normally, you'll see Nathan at this committee and/or David Tomlin as well, who are the financial audit leads in the team there. So just to kick off with the audit update paper, It's a very brief update audit on the financial audit work, in that the audit of the 25-26 financial statements is underway from our perspective, acknowledging we don't yet have those draft financial statements, given it's only the 7th of April. But we have been kind of working away in the background with Sian and the team to do planning work, updating our systems, documentation, and also trying to pick up some early areas of testing just to take that pressure out of the main audit window, which we'll come on to in the plan anyway, which starts in May and ends in June. So we've got that very tight kind of 6-week window to get the main audit done. So really grateful to Sian and colleagues who've been facilitating some early work in those areas.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Any questions for Mike? No, I think that's been very clear. Thank you. Let's move on then, and over to you, Andrew. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so in terms of the performance audit programme, I think, if I'm going to be completely frank, we're not where we wanted to be at this point in time. The estates work is on track, and as we scheduled at the beginning of the year, we always said we were going to do it at the back end. So for me, I'm sort of comfortable that's being delivered as planned. The digital transformation work has taken us across Wales, has taken us longer. We always said that the work at the HCW was going to be towards the back end, because we needed to complete the reviews across the other bodies in Wales to be able to help at least inform some of our work. Now, that work has taken longer than we anticipated. It has progressed reasonably well, but it has still taken longer than we anticipated. So a number of those reviews across audit bodies has gone out. So you may have heard that other bodies have now started to receive those, but we still have a few which are in train. So ultimately, for the digital transformation review, we are not where we expected to be, and I would have loved to have been able to bring that to this committee. Unfortunately, that isn't the case. The impact on that has also impacted the work on our remit letter work, because it's the same auditor that was going to be delivering that one, and we needed to prioritise this review. I'd like to say that it would be as simple as just going, right, okay, well, we'll continue the work programme as it is, and you know, everything will be okay, but we've got to make some decisions within our team about how we're prioritising our work. So that means probably from our point of view, reviewing some of the work that we get asked to do, which is non-audit delivery, and focus and make sure that we get your programme delivered. And that sort of goes very much to, I suppose, Alistair's comment that he made to internal audit, which is what would be the impact on your next year's plan with some of this delay, and that's why we absolutely need to prioritise that. So in terms of that, we are looking for the transformation review probably to be issued in 2 weeks to 3 weeks for clearance, and I appreciate that hasn't met this committee. We're happy if the report goes through to committee members in between committee. That's fine with us if you wanted to get an assurance from that. We've put it down to go to the July 2026 committee, appreciating that there are other committees, so the accounts work that it could go to. So again, there are particular options that we can discuss with you. But at the moment, I think we're looking at 2 to 3 weeks for us to get the report out through for clearance, and the remit letter a little bit after that. And I think given the discussion that's already been had on the remit letter and some of the challenges I think which are there, it's probably right that we sort of listen to that, and that sort of settles, and then we can form a view at that point. So yeah, unfortunately it's not where we want to be. It's not miles away, but it's not made it to this committee, which is I'm sure you'll probably be disappointed with that.
Yes, absolutely, because if you remember at our January meeting, we were concerned that it had just missed that window, and we were hopeful and indeed very confident that we would see it in the April meeting. But obviously there are challenges around engagement with a number of organisations playing into this review, and it echoes a theme we heard earlier on as well. Is this pressure on the system and the challenge of engaging all the organisations effectively in an all Wales review, Is that something that's worsening? You know, is it more of a problem now than it used to be? I'm trying to get a sense of the pressure points, because clearly this particular audit is of great significance to DHCW for a whole host of reasons, which is why we were so keen to see it. And of course, we parked a planned audit in terms of digital transformation for DHCW as well, because of the wider work that was being instigated. But I can see there are pressure points in the system. I'll turn to Alistair, because I'm sure Elsie wants to make a comment as well before coming back to you, Andrew, if I may.
Thank you, Marianne, and thanks, Andrew. I am sympathetic to the challenges of completing work that involves other organisations. I really do understand that it is disappointing. My concern is, and it may be something, Chris, that you might want to just comment on, whether or not the delay on performance audit has any unintended impact on our work in regard to our escalation status, and the issues concerned with performance and delivery that may be indicated to a certain extent there. So I just wondered if you could comment on that. It's clearly would be an unintended consequence, but I just wonder if you see that being an issue. Thanks.
Okay. So, Chris, do you want to come in on a DHCW perspective then before I turn back to Andrew?
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for the question, Alistair. I think, and Andrew might want to jump in, the last formal assessment period was the end of the 2025 calendar year, when a tripartite meeting took place to assess organisations' escalation levels, and the feedback from Audit Wales presumably informed the decision to keep us at level 3 enhanced monitoring for major digital programmes. I am conscious, Alistair, the escalation framework has been updated since that point, so there have been changes made, and to some extent, therefore, there is a bit of a unknown in terms of how the new framework will work across the system. So we're working with colleagues and partners to understand that more effectively going forward next year. We won't have the same interaction in terms of meetings with Welsh Government. They've stood down the joint executive teams and the integrated quality, performance and delivery meetings in place of new escalation-based meetings. So I don't think it would have impacted our status at this point, but going forward, I think there is an element of unknown with the new escalation arrangements and framework in place.
Thank you, Chris. Andrew.
Yes, on the escalation intervention, you'll probably be aware, we certainly don't get involved in any of the decision-making process. So it's sort of very clear when we have meetings with them. We have meetings with Welsh Government and Healthcare Inspectorate Wales, and when we do it, it's usually a round robin through organisations, and we share sort of our general audit intelligence, and same with Healthcare Inspectorate Wales with their programme of work. At that point, we leave Welsh Government, and any decisions that they make will be theirs and theirs alone. In terms of the timing, typically they're twice a year, so they're usually at the back end of a calendar year, and then somewhere midway through the year, typically around May or June time. In terms of our work programme affecting that, I can't see it, because our work will be sufficiently progressed at the point in time that we're next engaging in the routine meeting. So I don't think it will impact, Alistair. Marianne, if
I was just going to say, Andrew, just on the digital transformation, you stated that it will be going out to colleagues in other organisations in 2 weeks' time. Clearly, we're not meeting formally as a committee until July, but I think we would be very pleased to see the draft being circulated out of committee once it is available for circulation. I think that would be, Chris, are you happy for us to expedite that?
Yeah, I am, Marion, and I think, as Andrew said, there are some opportunities in May and June to build in some additional time. I was just going to comment as well, if it's okay. It might be worth, Andrew, just reminding the committee of the structure of the digital transformation audit in terms of the kind of first phase approach, how they've gone about that, and then the second phase and what each element looks at.
Yes, yes. So basically, largely, the first phase of the review is to focus more on DHCW's own internal transformation, digital transformation arrangements. It's very hard to sort of completely cut that off and say that doesn't cover some of the wider aspects. Then there is a question then around wider digital system leadership, because obviously DHCW has a wider strategic leadership role. In respect of that, then that's, I suppose, not gloriously isolated just to DHCW, because there's wider digital leadership across NHS Wales too. So our intent is at some point this year to start scoping work around doing a review of strategic digital leadership and program delivery. We've started discussions on that, but that's sort of part B of the work. So this work is more of a wrapper around DHCW's internal transformation arrangements, and includes aspects such as your own digital transformation plans. We've got quite an element on sort of understanding risk, cyber risk, infrastructure and continuity, and also sort of assurances that go into through things like PDC, audit, and the board. So that's the typical structure of this first review. As I say, it is somewhat difficult to completely put a wrapper around it when we're looking at finances. Some of those finances and investments will be not just solely for DHCW, but sort of for sort of wider transformation initiatives. But yeah, that's the structure of the work.
Thank you. That's a helpful reminder, Andrew, of the context and parameter of the work. So thank you for that update. Ifan, ti eisiau dod i mewn? Ifan?
Yeah, diolch yn fawr, Marian. I hope I'm not being too provocative here, and that's usually like a preface for being provocative. But it's a sincere question. You've mentioned DHCW and the other NHS Wales organisations. Where does Welsh Government fit into the scope of the audit of digital transformation across Wales? Because obviously Welsh Government has got a digital system leadership role, which is, from an authority perspective, much more robust than the DHCW one. You know, we can only lead by influence, whereas Welsh Government can lead by mandate or by policy or strategy setting or something like that. So how are you engaging with Welsh Government in the context of the wider digital transformation review?
Yeah, so that's definitely sort of the part B to the work, and that's why we're not doing it as part of your local audit review, because it wouldn't be form part of that. Our legislative framework is quite complex. We will be doing this under different audit legislation, which gives us the role to look at it across the whole of Wales, and that's anyone that would be involved in digital system leadership. So it would be more in the sort of the form of a national study type review rather than a local audit review. The digital transformation reviews that we've been undertaking are solely focused on the individual local review so far. So those do not in any way review the Welsh Government's leadership role. But as I say, part B will look at digital strategic leadership, and that's why we wanted to take a slightly different approach to that. So we look at it in the round. And it's not just Welsh Government as well, is it? I think there are a range of other bodies that are involved in that too.
Does that answer your question, Ifan?
It does. Thank you, Andrew. And look, or just to emphasise points that have been made by others, clearly given our context of escalation and the challenges that we recognise in terms of delivering complex collaborative programs, anything that we can do to support you to bring the digital transformation review to the next meeting, or to complete the phases as quickly as is possible, we will be very keen to do, because it's really important to us given our role in the system, and I think it's very important to NHS Wales in general as well to get a position on digital transformation, so that we can identify key improvements and then action those as quickly as we can, working across the whole system, not just DHW, but all organisations that are involved.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
I think Ivan's put it very well, underlining the importance and significance of this particular audit. So thank you. We will look forward to receiving then the report within the next 2 or 3 weeks when it's in a position to be circulated. Diolch yn fawr. Shall we move on then unless there are any other questions to the draft plan for 26-27, unless there's anything else you wanted to highlight in the update report, or Andrew?
Nothing further for me. I suppose the only thing, you did ask me a question about sort of the wider pressures that we might be experienced.
Yes.
So if I just come back on that, it's not something which we're experiencing uniformly across all bodies, but we certainly are, in the last year particularly, have seen organisations which are naturally facing their own service pressures finding it sort of more challenging to engage with us, and that is having an impact in the timeliness of our work.
And do you think it's worse in the context of digital than any other aspect?
It's probably been a little bit more pronounced, but not substantially.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's helpful. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So we are noting the update report for assurance, and thank you for being so open and willing to respond to our observations. Let's move on then to the draft audit plan for 26-27. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Chair. We'll double team it again. So I'll kick off and go through the financial audit elements, and then I'll hand over to Andrew to cover off the performance work set out in the plan. So I'll take the report as read, and I'll just quickly highlight some of the key points in the financial audit side. So page 6 sets out our high-level responsibilities for the audit of the financial statements, which is to give an opinion on their truth and fairness, their proper preparation, and the regularity of the income and expenditure of DHCW, which involves us comparing that to the intentions of the Senedd and the details set out in the establishment order for DHCW. Probably just to expedite this the report here, just moving on to the audit risks that we've got. So we've got 2 identified significant financial statement risks. Those are set out on page 8 of our report. The first one is management override. So this is a kind of a risk set out in auditing standards. It's non-rebuttable. It's present in all entities. So in all audit plans you will look at, you will see this risk. There's no work we can do to address that, to mitigate that risk fully. So that's why that's in there. And then the second significant risk we have is the risk of fraud in expenditure recognition, which sounds very alarming, but in reality, this is just set out in the FRC Practice Note 10, and it's kind of relevant to those entities that have financial targets, and it's just acknowledging that in some organisations there could be a risk that the year-end positions could be manipulated to meet those financial targets. So that's a risk we can't be kind of blind to. Even though there's good controls and processes in place at DHCW, we just need to reflect that and make sure that we've done sufficient work on our files to address that risk. We then go on to set out other areas of audit focus, which is those lower level risks, and not the significant risks, the lower level risks there. Wasn't proposing to go through those in detail, but more than happy to take any questions on any of those at the end. The timetable for our audit is included in Exhibit 1 on page 13. Just flagging with members that we're aiming to complete the audit by the end of June. And I understand there's a committee meeting been scheduled for the 25th of June, I think, to approve those audited financial statements. So following that, we will get the sign off of that from the Auditor General, and then we'll be laying the documents at the Senedd by the end of June. So that's it in terms of the financial audit work. Maybe if we just kind of take questions at the end when Andrew's finished delivering the rest of the report, Chair, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Andrew.
Thank you. I think the performance audit plan is relatively straightforward. We have the structured assessment as usual. It'll be, I don't know, 15th structured assessment across the whole of the world. We introduced it back in 2010 for obviously the HCW. Will be a fewer number, but it will be undertaken in exactly this or a similar way. I think we'll be focusing a little bit more on the impact between governance arrangements and performance effectiveness and delivery this year, but broadly speaking, it will be undertaken in the same way with a sort of similar scope. The local work that we're focusing on is related to wellbeing of future generations, and we have a statutory duty to assess that periodically. Obviously, as DHCW's become a named body under the Act, it becomes a point at which we then decide it'll be good to review it. Given some of the work that you've already got undertaken on an undertaking around foundational economy, I think it's probably a sensible thing to look at it this year. You've had a year or so to be able to start to embed your wellbeing objectives into your planning. So I think there'll be an opportunity for us to look at it this year. We've included just a line in the plan basically saying that we have the ability, same as internal audit, to flex our plan depending on changing risk. One thing that we may do under that is to undertake an approach around following up recommendations. So I think we will look at that probably in the next 2 or 3 months to decide if there's any specific work we need to do to follow up recommendations, or alternatively we could incorporate that as part of structured assessment as we've done in previous years, but that's an option that we have. So that's it largely on the performance audit plan. It's a relatively lean plan. Yes, the work on the follow-up recommendations, it may be something quite simple, or we might do something which is sort of a full follow-up review, but we'll discuss that with officers at the time. The only other aspects within the plan is the section on audit fees, and that notes a fee increase of 5.3%. That follows on from a 1.7% increase last year. So we had a below inflationary increase last year, and unfortunately it's an above inflationary increase this year. This reflects some of our ongoing staff growth in costs, but it also reflects an investment in quality to our international standards, and further investment into technology to support our work. So it's unfortunate, but it's a position in the round. It wouldn't reflect, or probably would reflect, a general inflationary increase across the 2 years. But unfortunately, last year was below, and this year is above. The final point I just wanted to raise was that David Thomas on performance audit, he was your engagement director. He's now since retired. So since we've issued the plan, he's retired. We knew it was going to happen, but we didn't know who his replacement would be. We will update the plan before we finalise it, but the replacement will be Tom Haslam, who's come in as the new director of the performance audit health team.
Okay. Thank you. That's very helpful, Andrew. And you have preempted a question which I was going to pose on the audit fee, clearly, as you would expect, and helpful to be reminded that there was a below inflation uplift in the previous year. Having said that, though, and I accept your explanation for the above inflation uplift, we have seen major accountancy firms reduce their audit fees and going quite public with that because of the adoption of new technology. From what you've said, though, you've got some investment to make before you're in a position to bring those sort of fee levels down consistently with other players. Is that how you would explain it?
Yes, I mean we will be absolutely investing. We're using new technology and we're going to continue investment in that. Just in terms of comparison, I don't know if it's sort of helpful to do this, but we charge substantially less than our peers across the border. Each year we go through a consultation process. Our last was in November 2025. At the same point in time, or similar point in time, the Public Sector Audit Appointments Organisation does that on behalf of Audit in England. I've got a table here which is of a comparison, but basically for each of our charge out rates by staff grade, They are quite substantially higher in England, and I can share that with you. I can share their consultation with you. We, part of that is because we don't make profit. So, firstly, in terms of your fees, we make no profit. If the cost of the audit are under but below the fee, then we, as I say, we cannot make a profit. So we would offer a refund against that. So it's based on our forecast. So yeah, I think in terms of overall cost and value, it's probably reflective and favourable in Wales.
Thank you, Andrew. That's very helpful context as well for the committee. It's just that the current climate, a lot of pressure on the finances and the expectation of making savings. I think it's only right that we discuss those openly. So thank you for giving me that context. That's really helpful. Thank you. I can't see any other questions. Chris, you want to come in? Chris Morton.
Thank you, Marion. Yeah, just one question for me on the draft plan. It was in relation to the financial materiality, and I was just wondering how you set financial materiality for us. So we've got 1% of gross expenditure, whereas I know in other NHS organisations, so I worked in Velindre previously, I think Velindra's is set at 2%. So I'm just interested to understand how that financial materiality has been set for DHCW, please. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Generally speaking, we have I use the word carefully, a default in the loosest sense of the word. So our general assumption is that Audit Wales has an approach of using 1%. It's not fixed, as you say. In certain other organisations and certain smaller organisations, we may increase that to 2%. As an example, if we're looking at a pension fund audit, as an example, that might have a 2% threshold there, but the benchmark might not be on expenditure, because in a pension fund, say those the main part of the pension fund is the assets and liabilities. So we use a different benchmark for that as well. So our general approach across the NHS audits will be 1%, and that kind of covers off on our other sectors as well. So on our local government audits, that's 1%. It can be varied. It is not fixed. It's not fixed in legislation. It's not fixed in auditing standards. It's more of a local team judgment. Generally speaking, the Audit Wales approach is 1% for audits of organisations of this size.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you for that question, Chris. If there aren't any further observations or questions, I propose to draw this part of the agenda to a close. So we have happily received the Audit Wales update and the Audit Wales plan for 26-27. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you again, colleagues, for joining us this morning. I'm conscious that we're running slightly behind time, and we'll move on now to the audit action log. Chris Darling, Board Secretary, please.
Thanks, Marion. Yeah, a fairly quick and straightforward position, this committee. So the report just illustrates the movement and changes in status in terms of the audit actions since the last meeting. The committee received 3 audit reports at the last committee meeting, those being the programme management, the CANISC and the risk management audits. They contained a total of 10 new actions that were added to the audit action log, giving us a total of 47 actions on the action log. Since the last meeting, 8 have been taken forward and marked as complete. They were included in the papers. That leaves 39 actions, and all 39 are currently on track for delivery within the timeline. So there's nothing that I'm bringing to escalate from the report. Just to note, as Steve did earlier, we've had the tracker audit recommendations, so we're factoring that into how we monitor these going forward.
Thank you, Chris, for the clarity of that presentation, and good to see that there are not any overdue actions. So a pleasing position to be in, and reflects a huge amount of work, I know, behind the scenes. So thank you. So the committee is being asked to note the audit action log, which we are happy to do. And finally, for this part of the agenda, we'll move to the local counter-fraud update report and the draft work plan for 26-27. So I'll now invite Steve Betty, who's deputising for Henry Bales today. Croeso Steve, who's here to present the two reports. Steve, thank you.
Yep, thank you, Chair. Morning, everybody. I was going to introduce myself, but Marion's just done a much better job than I would have doing that. So I'll go through the progress report first. I'll take this as read, but I'll pick out some key points. So in terms of the Q4 for last year, we have continued to promote awareness and education activity. As I'm sure some of you will be aware, DHCW now fully incorporates counter-fraud awareness training into all corporate inductions, and we have attended 2 sessions during this time, and which these were attended by around 50 members of staff. We always find that these sessions are very well attended, and we have a high compliance rate of training taken up. We have also produced a newsletter. We are going to try and make these, or we are going to make these more regular now. We have set up a little bit of a structure within the team to have somebody who is responsible for putting out newsletters. So that one has been put out, and I encourage you to click on the link. Jake, who does these newsletters, does like to look at his views and his likes. So I do encourage you all to have a look. And in terms of e-learning, e-learning continues to be available via ESR, and the compliance rate there, Henry, is put in as of 98%, and he wanted me to make sure I noted that was the highest compliance rate of all our organisations that we cover. So that's going very well. In terms of prevention work, we have put out 2 fraud prevention notices that were received during the period. I believe these were received from our Intel unit. However, no immediate concerns or issues or anything we had to do further came from those, so there's nothing further for us to look in, but it was good for awareness raising. In terms of our referrals and investigations, we have received 4 referrals during this period, and again, one of these was in relation to an intelligence submission from the previous section. 2 referrals were investigated, and we have 1 referral which has been promoted to a full investigation, which is still ongoing in relation to potential working elsewhere during contracted hours. And I'll talk a little bit about this further in our annual plan for next year, because it's something that we are receiving more referrals in relation to. In terms of significant salary overpayments, there were none for DHCW, so we are happy with that. We are finding that the salary overpayment system is becoming a lot better, a lot more streamlined, and we are picking things up a lot quicker. So sorry to sort of blitz through that, but there was sort of a very concise sort of report for what the last period. So if there's any questions, I'll take those now.
Thank you, Steve, and good to note the high level of compliance that DHCW has scored. I can't see any questions, but there's clearly a huge amount of work going on. And so we are being asked to note then the counter-fraud work carried out in Q4 of the last financial year. Thank you. Perhaps then you can take us through the counter-fraud draft work plan, which we're being asked to approve this morning.
Yes. We'll do, yeah. So this plan has been set out against the Government Functional Standards number 13 in relation to counter fraud, and obviously set up by the NHS Counter Fraud Authority. Henry has set this out. I think it's a bit differently to if you've received a couple of these over the years. It's set out a bit different. He's put this into in line with the 5 main pillars of counter fraud work: so prevent, detect, respond, build capacity, and collaborate, which I'll pick out a few points, key points of those as I go through it. Page 4, here we have set out the resource provision for the year going ahead. Again, days planned is 85, and you can see below that Henry has split those up between proactive and reactive work, 50 and 35. I'll just note on that we are currently undertaking a little bit of data gathering, a little bit of analytics about how we are sort of spending our time on our different organisations, not in any terms of lowering our sort of days given or anything like that. We're just looking at the balance of proactive and reactive work, because we are finding now that we are getting a bit more opportunity to do a bit more proactive work, so that may sort of change for the next year. But as it's set up for the year, we are happy that this is the way to go forwards. if I go down now to the various sort of pillars that I've mentioned earlier in relation to prevent, we are sort of continuing to raise awareness. I mentioned that earlier on, and the very high level of e-learning that is going on. But again, it's always good to highlight the very good job that is done in relation to organisation of the new starters corporate inductions. These are always very well attended, very well organised down in down in the building opposite the stadium. Yeah, and say that is going to continue to go out through on the year. I believe it's every other month at the moment, but yeah, these are sort of set to carry on going on. So hopefully we'll continue building that that compliance, and all new starters should receive a counter fraud input. In relation to the detect element of it, the National Fraud Initiative, we have completed the most recent round of matches. Again, there was nothing sort of major for DHCW to note, but again, these have also sort of been fully looked into, so and they are fully complied with. National and local proactive exercises. Currently, there are no national proactive exercises planned. However, it is worth noting that there has been a recent change in charge of the head of CFS Wales. The old head is retiring in the summer, so a new head has been appointed. So whether or not there will be a change in sort of national proactive exercises, I'm sure Henry will update in future if that is the case. But currently, there are no sort of no national proactive exercises planned. In terms of pre-planned exercises for DHCW, I mentioned earlier on, we had an investigation in relation to members of staff potentially working elsewhere whilst on sick leave, or working elsewhere during contracted hours, or having second employment whilst remote working. That is something we are going to be looking at now going forward in Q1, and that's maybe something that sort of becomes a more of a longer term thing. But yeah, that's based on a number of referrals we've had recently from People's Services, and we feel that that's something that needs to be looked at. So we're going to initially start by getting out some again, some sort of some newsletters which are going to highlight the sort of potential risks for working elsewhere whilst during contracted hours, and we're going to start with that, and then we're going to look into sort of how we can sort of tackle that going forward. We are going to continue to conduct any investigations that can come our way, and we are going to carry on doing things, maintaining via our clue system, and again, nothing there will really change. I believe that system is working well, so there's nothing there to note. In terms of our capability, we are now currently up to full staffing levels. We are up to 4. We have Henry managing, myself as a deputy, and we have 2 local counter fraud specialists. So we are happy that we are now fully staffed. We've had a little bit of a change the last sort of year or two, just sort of people moving to different roles, etc. That's all good now. And in terms of our training and CPD, there is we will all be sort of training and basically in compliance with there's a new sort of counter fraud profession training coming out this year, which we will all sort of be going through in order to gain that accreditation for the new sort of standard that is required. But other than that, obviously, Henry will continue to come to all his audit committees, and we will sort of report any lessons learned or anything that we feel needs to be sort of highlighted, will either be sent directly to directorate or through audit committee. And yeah, I don't think there's anything else I wanted to highlight. So again, a bit of a whistle-stop tour. So any questions, happy to take.
Thank you, Steve. That's very helpful counter through the draft plan then. Can I just pick up on the investigations into working elsewhere during contracting hours? You talked about the work that you'll be undertaking during Q1 and perhaps more broadly. This is quite a significant and a growing issue, clearly, in the UK. You talked also about the balance between the days of proactive work and reactive. Can we just seeking assurance, I guess, that you've got the necessary resources to be able to undertake this sort of work effectively?
Yeah, I mean, we're fully staffed. I believe we have the resources available to us. Whether Henry would always say you would always like a little bit more resources, but I think that's as we are currently, we're not sort of there's not any detriment to sort of the service we're able to provide. Far from it. We've got 4 ex-police officers who are sort of very well versed in criminal investigations and everything we need to do, and proactive work. So yeah, I think we're doing well there. And again, that work ongoing is as in response to the number of referrals we've had recently.
Yeah. Thank you, Stephen. I can't see any of the hands up, so I think we are happy. We're being asked to approve the counted for draft work plan for this new financial year, which I believe from colleagues' reactions that we are happy to do so. And thank you again for joining us this morning, Steve. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We will have a short comfort break now then. It's 10:59 on my clock, so we'll come back at 10 minutes past the hour then. Thank you very much. We'll see you shortly. Oes yn ôl gyfeillion, mi symud ni mlaen efo ail ran y pwyllgor archwilio bore yma. Welcome back everybody. We'll now move on to the second half of this morning's meeting. And we'll open this section then with the Staff Culture and Wellbeing Advisory Review as one of our suite of governance reports. And it's my pleasure now to invite Samantha Morgan, who is Director of People and Organisational Development, to introduce this item, which was requested by the committee, if you recall, following the advisory report undertaken by NHS Wales Shared Services Partnership. Samantha, croeso.
Croeso. Bore da, good morning. Thank you, Chair. So colleagues will recall that the summary report on the Staff Culture and Wellbeing Advisory Review was presented in December of last year, and that there was agreement in that meeting that we would provide quarterly updates. So this report is the first of those quarterly updates. So my intention today is to just briefly draw out the main points. You will have had the opportunity to read the report in full. So the recommendations arising from the review have been translated into a structured action plan, which you can see set out within the report. And the progress is being made across all of the key themes identified. I think the general picture is one of actions remaining on track, I'm pleased to say, with a number that have already been implemented or scheduled during this quarter. So in terms of objective 1, I think we've made really good progress in strengthening the overall framework. And we've now developed an annual health and wellbeing plan, which has SMART objectives, and that work is now starting to be embedded across our organisation. We're also progressing to align the behavioural framework as well with the appraisals and organisation values, and that work you see coming into fruition through our new digital learning portal called My LMS. And we have a staff briefing session later this afternoon, and we'll be asking people across the organisation to join us in helping us develop that alignment with our behavioural framework and PADRs. So a really important next step for us. So in terms of objective 2, the focus has been more on proactive than preventative arrangements. There's been real progress, I think, in terms of the management support that we've put in place around stress and sickness absence. And we're continuing to improve the work around the environment that we create for people to work in. And I think the estates team, just a shout out to them, they've done a tremendous job in refurbishing lots of areas and making the areas fit for purpose and supporting the needs of our employees. So that's really reassuring to see that work being done. I think the report also identifies some wider issues, particularly around the funding model and reliance on external funding. And I just wanted to point out to colleagues that this sits beyond the control of people in OD, but we do our very best within that context to manage people's well-being around end of fixed term contracts and provide support for redeployment wherever we possibly can. And then under objective 3, the report highlights improved oversight and accountability. We have started to embed culture, people into our directorate reviews. And I think that is a first for us as an organisation. So people, as part of those directorate reviews, are now required to talk about culture and how they are demonstrating impact and improvement against their own individual area culture improvement plans. So I'm really pleased to see that work has got momentum. And we've had some fantastic spotlight sessions as well, where people across the organisation have been highlighting from a learning and sharing perspective the work that they've been doing and the difference that that's making. So that's really encouraging to see. And then finally, for objective 4, the emphasis has been on support and training, and we've been making sure that we've increased awareness around neurodiversity, a really important aspect of what we've been doing. And we've had fantastic feedback as well on that training, with people saying that it really has helped them understand what wasn't clear to them previously, and that will help them in terms of how they manage and lead people and how they work with each other across the organisation. And we've also done further work around spotlighting the role of mental health first aid trainers. So that again is us making sure that we've got the framework in place that supports people when there is pressure, and we have got a lot of pressure across the system at the moment. So this work is really good to do from a preventative perspective. Really glad that we're doing that. So in terms of the risks and wider assurance, I think, the report places this work alongside a number of related audits as well and action plans, including diversity inclusion, the recruitment action plan, the RES and the staff survey actions as well. So there's lots of different work that feeds into this that we are reporting on. But personally, I'm really pleased with the progress that's being made. There's always a lot more that can be done, and there will be more work to do in this place. I think it's also worth drawing out our current staff survey position as well, Chair, because this does relate to how engaged people are and how people are feeling. We have seen a slight dip in terms of our score, but we are still performing really well when you benchmark us across the rest of the system. So again, really pleased to see us up there in the top quartile of scores. And I think it's probably timely to acknowledge in this meeting the wider operating context and how challenging that is going to be for the year ahead in terms of tighter recruitment controls, more looking at how we do things, what we do, and how we step down things to create more capacity in this current climate. So I think that we need to be really careful and think about the impact that's having on people, on culture, and we will continue to do that in a way that's compassionate, kind, caring, but also taking into consideration the needs of the wider system as well. So thank you, Chair. I'm going to pause there and see if there's any questions.
Thank you, Samantha. That's great to hear that such a wealth of activity going on as a result of that audit. I'm going to open it out to questions, and I'll start with Marilyn, if I may, first, and then we'll go to Alistair. Diolch.
Marilyn, independent board member. I just want to say diolch yn fawr, thank you, Sam, because I know there's lots of work going on behind the scenes, which is not always fully reflected in the report. I know in your last comment, you said about the challenges within people in OD. Could you give us some idea of the sort of the extent of how that's differed to things in the past, so that we can get some sort of a perspective on the challenge that we have ahead of us?
Yes, so colleagues will be aware that we have somewhat of a recruitment freeze placed on us at this point in time, and that will create challenges for our workforce, and it will mean that we have to think differently about how we meet capacity, because we're not going to be creating any more capacity. The only way to do that will be to look at what work we need to stand down, what work isn't priority work. And again, we know that people, they come to work with a great sense of purpose and they're committed and engaged in the work that they do. But there will need to be trade-offs, Marilyn, in terms of, what we stop doing, where we deploy our resources, because, that recruitment freeze is going to force us to look internally more. There might be less opportunity for promotions as we move forward, because we will be needing to look at what capacity we've got and how we can utilize that capacity differently. So it will present challenges into the workforce, and it will require us all to think differently and more creatively.
Thank you very much.
Ultimately, engagement could be impacted by this, but we'll be keeping a close watch on that.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you, Marilyn. Alistair.
Yes, thanks, Sam, and some very interesting, useful updates there. So do appreciate that. My question is whether we're assessing here well-being as part of the culture, of course, many organizations would, as part of the culture, be assessing performance. Clearly the two are linked, well-being of the staff and the organizational performance. And I just wonder your comments on whether we've got the balance right. Are we looking at culture in terms of how it's delivering performance? And just reflecting on the issue that you relate to including generic performance objectives for staff across the organization in the coming financial year, and whether we actually have specific performance objectives as opposed to generic ones. Thanks.
Thanks, Alistair. Sam.
Thank you. So really good questions, Alistair, and you would expect me to say this, but I truly believe this, that culture is at the centre of high performance in an organisation. If we haven't got the culture right, if we haven't got people who feel valued, supported and enabled to do the work that they need to do, then we're never going to get performance where it needs to be. And I think well-being is at the centre of that. You can't perform well if you're not well. So I think that's a really, really important aspect of what we do. And all of the work that we're doing here is around culture and trying to create that environment and support to enable people to deliver to their very best what they need to deliver. So that's the first part of the answer, Alistair. Do you want to come in there before I go on to the next piece?
Yes, Sam. It's absolutely got to be the case, as you've outlined, that the well-being of staff and the culture are major contributors towards an organization's success in performing and delivering on its individual objectives and its collective objectives. So that's not in something I'm questioning. I guess I'm asking the question, to what extent we're making the assessment between culture and well-being, and the way that well-being plays a key role in the culture. But I'm asking, are we making any assessment between the link between well-being and performance? So you're saying that you absolutely believe it. I also agree with you. I absolutely believe it. But to what extent are we demonstrating that what we are doing in the development of well-being is actually assisting us in good performance and delivery? So I just wondered if you had any thoughts on that. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a really hard measure to evidence, Alistair. But what I can say is that our IMTP delivery has improved year on year. So that could be one measure, but there are so many different things that would play into that. So it's we look at our absence levels; they're stable at the moment. So you could look at the measure of if absence is increasing significantly and you haven't got people available to do the work, then the attainment of delivery is going to dip. I think it's a really hard line of sight to kind of say this is the evidence that our investment in well-being is creating higher performance is the honest answer. I think it's a multitude of different things that help create that culture and environment, and well-being is one of them.
It's a really good question, and perhaps we can sort of park it and maybe come back to it towards the year end when some of those additional action plans that are currently on track to be delivered have been delivered, and we can look at it in the round of as we look back over the previous year's performance. Should we do that?
Yes.
Thank you. And then there was Alice's second question.
Yes, so the second part of the question was around generic objectives, and this one in particular pointed to ED&I generic objectives. So we've done that at exec level, and what we want to do now is take that to the next level and have ED&I as a generic objective within everybody's objectives. So that was the reference that was being made there, Alistair.
Thank you. So we'll bring this discussion to a close. Thank you so much, Sam, for bringing this update. There's a wealth of actions, and so heartening to see them on track, and whilst admittedly it is difficult to measure the impact on performance of the organisation, as we already discussed, there is a very strong correlation, isn't there, between well-being and performance, and the evidence is quite strong out there as well. So we are being asked to note the report for assurance, and thank you and the team for responding so positively and bringing the report to us this morning. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Chair.
We'll move on then to agenda item 5.2, which is the finance and procurement session. I will now invite our interim director of finance, Chris Morton, to take us through the finance and procurement session. There are a suite of items, and we are running slightly behind schedule, so I'm sure you'll bear that in mind as you present this suite of papers. So over to you then, Chris, and perhaps you can introduce your colleagues as you hand over. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch yn fawr. Thank you, Chair. So yes, as you say, there's 7 items to run through. I will take the last 3 of those as a suite of items of the IMTP remit letter and accountable officer letter. I'll just step through, again, conscious of time, the first one here, which is the high value PO report, cumulative report. And what I'll do is just pause after each section just to take any questions before moving on. So in terms of the high value PO report, this report is there for noting. We've had 2 high value POs added between January and March. There are a further 2 that have been added to the cumulative position as well. Those 2 relate to some cloud and technical architecture areas for Channel 3 Consulting, and again, cloud and PCMH for TPX impact in the cumulative point. But the report is there just for noting, so happy to take any questions on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I can't see any hands up, so I think the committee is happy to note the update. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the second is the procurement and scheme of delegation compliance report. In this report, again, for noting, we have 2 single tender actions at total value of 203k, just over, 2 single quotation actions at 36k, and 3 change control notices set out at a value of 712.8k. Further, we just draw the committee's attention towards just a couple of matters for escalation in regards to non-compliance. These are set out in section 5 in the report, where we've had to implement retrospective action, one being in relation to eMental Health International Collaborative membership fees. That was, again, something that commenced in October, where we have had to put in place a retrospective SQA. But again, we've noted that and put in place some actions to resolve it, and again, just reinforce the message with line managers around the importance of being proactive in this space. Secondly, there is one in relation to the Agile Product Delivery Partner Framework Agreement. Again, this is a long-standing commitment that we've had with our contractor in this space, and it was, again, noting that this was signed retrospectively, but again, we have put in place actions to address this. So again, this report is here for noting the single tender actions, single quotation actions, and 3 change control notices, and also the 2 non-compliances which we've addressed, but happy to take any questions on that paper as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Are there any questions on that? It's pretty clear, I think, and you've highlighted the actions that are being taken to mitigate against further occurrences in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Losses and special payments. This was just a verbal update. I would just highlight that we will cover a loss, but in the private section of the audit committee, given the commercial sensitivity.
Thank you.
We also have an update on the annual financial accounts. So for this one, I will just hand over to Sian just to give us a brief update in terms of where we're at for the annual financial accounts planning. Thank you.
All I do have some slides. Hopefully they're just coming through. I will.
Yeah, we're seeing them. That's great, Sian. Croeso.
Just waiting for me to be able to flip them over a second. So it's the fifth set of accounts produced by DHEW. I'm just going to cover the high-level timeline, deliverables, some technical considerations, improvements identified this morning. The MFA set out the deadlines for the accounts, and they are the draft accounts of 1st of May, the audited accounts, as Mike said earlier, the 30th of June, and the AGM likely to be the 31st of July. So we have completed our accounts ahead of the deadlines in the past 4 years, and we'll try and do so this year as well. I'm pleased to say that interim testing is underway, which will help release the pressure on some of the accounts team and Audit Wales during May and June. We have received the Audit Wales deliverables requirement, and this has been incorporated within the DHW detailed closure plan. And the closure plan includes a timetable with responsible officers for required tasks, a detailed timetable, also guidance for finance teams in order to produce the accounts and communications that have gone to all staff. So for the audit committee, we are currently in the preparation stage. This is our high-level plan. DHEW have been meeting with Audit Wales monthly, kicking off in January. And Audit Wales, we were lucky enough to have them come and join a team meeting with finance to set out their expectations during the audit period. Some other deadlines on the high-level timetable. The audit committee will meet to review the draft accounts 7th of May and the final accounts on the 25th in readiness for submission on the 30th of June. Some considerations for this year accounts. A big area of focus will be around the treatment of Microsoft VAT recovery following the assessment letters now received by HMRC. This will impact on a number of areas, including the provision that we had in the 24-25 accounts, and also in terms of losses and special payments. The accounts will also include, as per previous years, an annual leave provision, which is holiday pay earned but not paid, and an immaterial bad debt provision, and also adjusted for the notional pension rate. This year, there's a change in the presentation in the remuneration report. The single total remuneration report salary is reported after adjustment for salary sacrifice. And salary sacrifice is reported as a benefit. A footnote should be included to report gross salary before salary sacrifice adjustment. So just something to raise to the audit committee. Following the audit of the 24-25 accounts, Audit Wales made 5 observations and recommendations. DHEW conducted a post-accounts learning meeting in September to explore these and other issues, and I'm pleased to say they've all been addressed. So I ask for audit committee to note the contents of the report and paper and the delivery timelines to produce successful annual accounts.
Okay, thanks, Sian. Just open that up in case there's any questions.
Thank you, Sian. That was very, very clear resume of the process between now and the completion of the accounts for year end. Are there any questions? I can't see any. And helpful to end your presentation on the lessons learned from the last process. And we've heard assurance that all 5 recommendations have been addressed. So thank you for that. And we note the contents of the report and the timelines involved. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Sian. So the final set of this suite of reports we'll take all together, which is the IMTP, the remit letter, and the accountable officer response to the remit letter. So these are all presented here just for noting, but just in terms of, again, some key points to draw out. Really, this for the audit committee, this is in relation to our accountable officer letter response. And again, as we alluded to earlier in this meeting, our DPIF funding is still outstanding. So that is the most material item. And without that confirmation, we've not been able to confirm that we can deliver a financial balance in 26-27. So we have drafted an accountable officer letter to highlight this. One slight update to the AO letter that was drafted. In the AO letter, we said that we had one SLA outstanding for signature. I can confirm now that we have all our SLAs signed and agreed for next year. So the only financial amount outstanding is the DPIF funding allocation. A couple of other points, again, that the audit committee should be aware of in this context. One is that we are currently undertaking a financial grip and control review. This was at the behest of the Director General for Health, Social Care and Early Years. So we are taking that in line with other organisations across NHS Wales, and that is a self-assessment of our key internal controls, which cover workforce procurement and non-pay spend more broadly. And also, finally, we will be undertaking a financial baseline review in line with the requirement of the remit letter. And again, we've touched upon the remit letter and the recruitment freeze that has been included within that. We also additionally had a request for a financial baseline review. We have drafted a terms of reference, which we'll agree as an exec team, and we will take that forward to make sure we complete that within the first quarter of the new financial year, so that it's submitted to Welsh Government by the end of June. So those are the key items really that I'd pull out of that suite to note, Chair, but happy to take any further questions on those as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. That was very clear. And of course, the IMTP was presented and approved at board at the end of March. Pleasing also to hear that the one outstanding SLA signature has now been addressed and delivered. Let me turn then to our board secretary, Chris Darling. Chris.
Diolch, Marion. Yeah, it was just a comment on that actually, Marion, because I think this is the first year we've had all SLAs signed and agreed before the start of the new financial year. And I think that's quite an achievement. I know a lot of work has gone into that from the finance and operations teams, taking learning from previous years. So it's just a comment.
Thank you, Chris. It is significant, and I think underlines the work involved in getting us to this positive position just at year end of this. Thank you. So unless there are any other observations, and I can't see any, we are noting then the finance and procurement updates. We will move on then to the deep dive. As you know, we ordinarily take a deep dive into issues of particular significance. And as part of that process, today we will be looking at the Procurement Act, which, as you recall, came into force in February of last year. So I'm going to invite Chris to present this item for discussion. Diolch yn fawr, Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So just in terms of the Procurement Act, I actually think this builds upon some of the work that we did in the deep dive previously around the foundational economy, because procurement for us is going to be a key lever for helping to drive change in that area. I've asked Rachel Stirrup to join us today, who's helped to develop this presentation, and again it builds upon a board development session that we delivered recently, just to provide a brief overview to the audit committee of the Procurement Act and DHCW's response in terms of the work that we've done to implement it. So I'll hand over to Rachel, and again we'll look to cover this probably 7 or 8 minutes plus a bit of time for questions at the end, if that's okay.
It's great, thank you, and welcome, Rachel.
Thank you.
Diolch, Chair. Bore da pawb. Thank you for your time this morning. I would like this morning to go through some background and context of the Procurement Act, key changes seen in procurement and key changes within the contract management space, training and engagement that the organisation have undertaken to date, and welcome any questions at the end of the session. So, as the Chair set out, the Procurement Act came into force on the 24th of February 2025, so we're already over a year in. The key objectives that the procurement brought in were value for money. So much like the previous regulations, Public Contract Regulation 2015, value for money is key when undertaking public procurement. However, in the Procurement Act, slight change in the way that we evaluate our procurements. Rather than looking at the most economically advantageous tender, Procurement Act brings in the most advantageous tender. Now, much like the second point there, maximising public benefit, the Procurement Act allows us to consider wider benefits when we are looking to procure services, goods, etc. from third parties. We already were looking at social value benefits and bringing that into our procurements. However, that Procurement Act really drives us forward in enabling that through procurement and measuring that through contract management. Sharing information remains as with previous regs. However, Procurement Act obligations now ensure that sharing of information, that transparency, is right through from requirements gathering up to contract exit. And finally, acting and being seen to act with integrity. So as I said, there is much more transparency requirements within the Procurement Act, and therefore that enables us to ensure we are meeting procurement regulations. It ensures that we report on them. We ensure that our suppliers are acting in a fair, transparent manner. And there are new requirements within the Procurement Act that mean that if suppliers are seen to not be acting with integrity, they can be put on a supplier debarment list, which means that they cannot tender for public procurement in the future. So some key features. So firstly, a simplified procurement framework. So as we'll see in the procurement section, procurement procedures have been reduced under the Procurement Act. There's support for SMEs and VCSEs. So there are ways in which procedures are streamlined to enable SMEs to bid. We are encouraged to consider lots when procuring for potentially larger contracts to ensure that SMEs and VCSEs can bid. There's Welsh governance provisions, so there are specific exemptions or additional requirements that as Welsh contracting authorities we must align to. Fair competition and accountability, again, that's all around transparency, fairness, and those increased notices to the public and the market ensures that we remain accountable. And enhancing transparency and integrity. And as I said, there are new mechanisms, including the supplier debarment list, to exclude poor performers and fraudsters. So whilst the Procurement Act is now in force, there are many other frameworks and policies that we as a commercial services team in DHCW need to ensure we consider. As you can see, there are a number of them, so the Procurement Act isn't just the one piece of legislation that we consider. We're also in a transition period, so we have contracts that will remain under PCR 15 regulations for a number of years. We've also we use frameworks on which they were awarded previous regulations, and so any call-offs from those again will be on PCR 15. So there is work to ensure that we are fully understood which regulations apply to which contract, of which we have currently approximately 160 live contracts. So as I've said, in terms of the procurement side of things, procedures have reduced from 7 to 3. So we've retained that open procedures where we welcome the entirety of the market to bid for work. Competitive flexible procedure replaces the competitive dialogue and the innovation partnerships, etc. So we've got one route to market, but we can be flexible in the way in which we design our procedure. And finally, the direct award, again, that is retained. That was in PCR 15. It's now in Procurement Act 23. So all in all, simpler, and it allows us to design competitions where we have a substantial requirement, a niche requirement, and we can work with suppliers to build up that procedure. Transparency and reporting, I've already touched on this, but one key thing to note on the impact really of the additional transparency requirements is that it is an administrative burden on the team. However, we have brought a new contract management system into place so that we can track that, we can ensure that we are triggered to ensure that we meet the additional transparency requirements. This slide is just for information and just to show really the scale of the increase in notices. So in the dark blue boxes are previous requirements from the regulations. The light blue are the new requirements of notices that we need to publish when we're undertaking procurement activity. Timescales have reduced. So for example, tendering periods reduced from 30 days under PCR down to 25 calendar days. Contract award slightly increased because we now have to publish an award notice before we award a contract to a supplier. And the standstill period has changed from 10 calendar days to 8 working days. So in contract management, we've seen a lot more about contract management in the Procurement Act, whereas PCR was very much focused on the upfront procurement. So we've got to ensure that we publish notices, that for any contracts over £5 million, we set out key performance indicators for our suppliers. So that means that we can really manage our suppliers and we can be transparent about their performance. This means that we can and have to work really closely with our service owners, our contract managers out in the business within DHCW to ensure that management is ongoing and really drives that value then from our suppliers. There's slight changes in the contract modifications. So whilst previously and going forward, contract changes are permissible, there are some slight changes which we have noted, and we are, as a commercial team, confident that when changing a contract, we're confident we know what to consider. There are additional transparency requirements And so it's really important that we align to these new regulations. What hasn't changed? So the key tenets of competitive procurement, so competition fairness, equality and transparency. So internal governance remains the same. Internal processes have slightly changed, but the approval processes will remain aligned to SFIs. We still adhere to national organisation policies, and we still have the same requirement for documentation of decisions and audit trails. I'll skip this because you'd have already seen the slides, but those are the numbers there of the activities. We're very much still on the upward climb in terms of utilisation of Procurement Act. But for your information, we have, as a team, undertaken significant training in the Procurement Act. We are also working with, or have worked with, the majority of the organisation and ensuring there is awareness of the Procurement Act. And as you'll see there, we're also undertaking some process re-engineering in the guise of a new contract management tool, which will enable that transparency from requirements gathering right to contract exit. But of course, we've still got continuous learning and improvement, which we are ensuring that we're keeping up to date with any Welsh Government, UK Government updates and Welsh procurement policy notices. I'm conscious of the time, there are some case studies, but what I don't, unless there are any questions specifically around that case study, I'll stop there and invite other questions.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Rachel. Appreciate that. So we'll just pause there and just open it up to any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. That was a very clear and comprehensive presentation. I'm sure we can dip into the case studies outside of the meeting. Perhaps I could kick off by asking you about the impact. Clearly, you mentioned the impact, increased administrative burden as one example. Now, the Act has been in force now for what, 13, 14 months. Is it too soon for us to be made aware of the positive impacts and whether this Act is delivering its intended purpose and delivering benefits for DHCW?
Thank you, Chair. I would say yes, particularly for the delivery and transparency of the contract management side. So yes, we've seen an increased administrative requirement from a procurement perspective. What we haven't seen yet is we haven't awarded a contract over the £5 million threshold, which will then enable us to work more closely and more transparently with the supplier on the KPI reporting. Now, I think once we award that contract and we see that through, I'm sure that is where we'll see the benefit of those additional transparency requirements, of the supplier's performance being out there for, you know, its competitors, other potential customers to see.
Yeah. Thank you. That's very, very helpful. And, you know, it's going to be a step change incrementally as we move forward, I'm sure. Are there any other questions or observations for Rachel? I don't think there are, Rachel, so thank you. I think that reflects the clarity and the detailed nature of your very interesting presentation. So thank you for joining us this morning. It's very important that we are brought up to speed with the requirements of the Act and how critically DHCW is implementing its requirements. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you.
Diolch.
We'll move on then, colleagues, if we may, to agenda item 5.4, which is the Corporate Risk Register. And I will now invite Chris Darling to update us on the Corporate Risk Report, and specifically the 3 risks assigned to this committee. Diolch yn fawr, Chris.
Diolch, Marion. Yes, I'll start there, and then I'm just going to update on some of the remit letter requirements from a risk management perspective for the committee to consider. So the committee have 3 risks assigned to it. 0331 fixed term resource funding, which has been a risk for a while. I'll check in a second if Sam wants to comment on that in terms of the work being done to mitigate. 0337 sustainable digital services and development funding model. And I think the internal audit that Stephen provided earlier gives some assurance, I guess, in terms of the move towards a more sustainable funding position, but certainly by no means mitigated. And I think for DHEW to move to a product way of working, a more sustainable or reliable funding model needs to be in place or developed to allow certainty around continuous improvement. And then the final risk assigned to the committee is 0351 changes in the political landscape in Wales. And we know we're a day away from the pre-election period, which potentially brings with it changes in policy, funding allocation, etc., etc. So that's something we're very much horizon scanning and aware of moving into next financial year. And I think our IMTP has been developed knowing that there might be additional requirements throughout the year and to incorporate going into next year. So I'll pause there, and particularly the fixed term resource funding, whether Sam wants to comment on that in terms of the mitigations, because I know that's been one that's been on for quite a long time.
Thanks, Chris. So just to say that we follow our own robust internal scrutiny in terms of fixed term contracts. We don't want to exacerbate the situation any more than we currently have. For those people who are coming to an end, we're waiting for our DPIF funding, so we've still got that risk that we carry in terms of extending, but we look at each on a case by case basis and extend on that basis. We put a lot of support in for individuals in terms of looking at potential redeployment. That will be more challenging, I think, given the current situation. But yes, it's an ongoing process, really. And as Chris said, there's lots that's outside of our control there, but what is inside of our control, we are trying to manage to mitigate the risk. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. I will just move on to the one risk assigned to this committee, which has since the last committee meeting been removed from the risk register, which is the DDAT, Digital Data and Technology Governance Review implementation. And that was on the recognition that the subgroups under the DDAT Leadership Board and Delivery Board have now been established. That I wouldn't say they're kind of fully embedded across the system, but they have all met, I think, now for the first time over the last month or so. So that's positive progress and something from a DHCW perspective that's been incredibly welcomed. Marion, I just wanted to touch on the remit letter and some of the requirements from a risk perspective and just test a couple of things. We have a board development session later this month at the end of April, where we're going to be having a bit of a focus on horizon scanning, risk management. So we'll cover some of this there, but just to note from the remit letter that it does state that there's a requirement to define and communicate clear risk tolerance levels for all programs. So the suggestion, I think, would be to refer that to the Programmes Delivery Committee to as they assess each of the programs, to assign a risk tolerance level to each program. And the remit letter is quite explicit around setting explicit boundaries for the amount and type of risk that's acceptable in pursuit of the program objectives. And in some cases, I think the challenge there will be the objectives are not solely DHCWs, they are system wide. So I think it'll be useful to tie in some of that work with the work we've got planned with Audit Wales colleagues around exploring what's within our control, what's outside of our control, and how we focus on the right things. Because I think there's a very clear direction of travel from the remit letter, and I think it'll be useful to get into that, and then how importantly we communicate that effectively to the system and back to Welsh Government so that there's a common understanding. The other thing I just wanted to pull out from the remit letter from a risk perspective is just the comment around strategic risks that impact multiple organisations, require cross-government collaboration, and that these should be discussed with Welsh Government officials. So again, we've got the board development session at the end of the month. I wanted to flag it here before that because I think it would be really helpful to get into that as a board and include audit colleagues, Audit Wales, but also internal audit, given the decision earlier to defer the intensive care audit because of areas outside of our control. I think this all plays into a similar consideration for DHCW, where there are risks that don't necessarily sit solely with us. How do we most effectively manage with stakeholders and communicate effectively so everyone's clear of the expectations?
Thank you very much, Chris, for highlighting those specific risks associated with the remit letter. So just to be clear, the Digital Programmes Delivery Committee will be considering that risk tolerance, the risk appetite tolerance. When will that happen? When is the next committee due?
May, next month.
Okay, so we'll have a board development session, first of all, at the end of April, to be followed by the programme's delivery consideration of that. Thank you very much. Can I ask whether there are any issues, any questions that colleagues want to raise? I think you've highlighted those points very, very clearly, Chris, so thank you for that. We are asked to receive and discuss the status of the corporate risk register, which we have done. I'm conscious that we are pretty tight for time as well, so thank you for that. And we'll move on to the last substantive agenda item, which is the Welsh Language Standards Report. And in Laura's absence, I will invite Chris to bring us the Welsh Language Standards Report. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch, Marion. Yeah, and a really important report in terms of timing, because we've had the Welsh Language Compliance Notice on the 4th of March this year, which was expected, and we've been liaising with the Commissioner. So that's helpful. So DHW are committed to creating a culture where Welsh language is visible and valued. I think that's really important for us. The cultural aspect is fundamental from our perspective, I think, to achieving some of the compliance requirements set out within the compliance notice. And the compliance notice sets out the requirements under 4 areas: service delivery, policy making, operational and supplementary standards. So specifically relating to correspondence, telephone services, meetings, public events, digital services, recruitment, staff policies, training and internal administration. And although we've operated to the Welsh Landed Scheme, so these aren't new things to us, being under the standards, I think, does bring a bit of extra rigour to the requirements and having to adhere to those. So I think it's useful for the committee to be aware of that. The imposition dates for the standards range from the 4th of September 2026 to the 4th of March 2027. So there is a bit of time organisationally to prepare ourselves and get ready. And we'll probably need that time, I think, in a number of areas. So we are working closely with teams across the organisation to get ready. Just moving through the report, a couple of other things I just wanted to pick up. In terms of the current staff Welsh language skills data, the workforce data shows a 54% of DHW staff have Welsh language skills as reported on ESR. That was against a target for the end of this financial year of 60%. So we've narrowly missed this, despite this being pushed on a number of all staff mechanisms. Helen promoted this at the last staff briefing 6 weeks ago. We haven't quite managed to get to the 60% mark, but that target will be set now for the 2026-27, and hopefully we continue to make progress there. We do have a range of courses, free courses, including courtesy level provision. So to some extent, there's no excuse for us not to achieve that target by the end of this financial year. I think where it's probably more challenging, but we have set some stretch targets, both in the draft Welsh language strategy and in the people and OD strategy recently approved, is around level 2+ improvements. And I think that's something that we'll be keeping a close eye on moving forward. So from a Welsh language strategy perspective, just to highlight that we are in the process. I spent half a day on Thursday last week with the team going through this to consider the requirements of the standards, the ambition set out in more than just words, the 5-year plan. And we are going to be replacing the bilingual skills strategy and Welsh language policy with this overarching Welsh language strategy. So that should give us a clear organisational direction, and the timing, I think, helpful in terms of the standards coming into force. Finally, I just wanted to highlight a couple of risk areas. So obviously the standards bring with it a legal and reputational risk in terms of non-compliance. But also we've had a fairly significant reduction in the Welsh language funding for 2026-27. Should say it's not unique to the Welsh language area across the organisation. We are looking at how we can do more with less generally, but it is something we're working closely with our accountant on to understand how we can manage some of the pressures on the Welsh language funding. I think to some extent we've been a victim of our own success over the last couple of years. We've effectively brought in-house some translation services, which has been excellent. I have to commend the team for taking that approach, supplementing the service we get from NWSSP. But demand continues to increase for translation, and it will increase again going into next financial year. So that's the one, I think, significant area of risk we have that I will just want to make the committee aware of. So I will pause there, Chair, and happy to take questions.
Thank you. And you've highlighted one of the areas of concern that struck me, that 80% reduction in funding. Of course, it happens in parallel with what we've seen is a not insignificant increase in terms of internal staffing resources. So I think we need to keep a watching brief and to hear further down the line what impact that has. And I guess it does spark our recruitment freeze, inevitably raises some questions and risks for us in terms of the service desk, which is an outward facing service. If staff do depart, it presumably will make it more difficult for us unless we can make a very solid case to maintain that level of bilingual staff within that team. How concerned should we be, Chris, about that risk?
I think that specific risk is probably top of my list of risks relating to this report, Marion. We know that's been a pressure historically. And in addition to that, the service desk, the turnover in that area is relatively high. So we would expect, based on history, to see staff movement over the next 12 months. And depending on how long the recruitment freeze lasts for, it is going to be more difficult. We can, as per the remit letter in exceptional circumstances, make a case to Welsh Government for replacement of staff. And I would like to think that in a public facing role like that would probably be looked on more favourably than perhaps some of the other roles. But I think it is a risk for us.
Yeah. Thank you. And on a more positive note, really welcome the development of that overarching Welsh language strategy. Could you give us a sense of the timeline around that, Chris?
Yeah, so the strategy itself is in final draft. The discussion last week was to try and test it actually more informally before going through the formal engagement process. So both test it informally within DHW, but also with a couple of trusted colleagues externally who have expertise in this area. Once we've done that, we'll start the formal consultation process within DHW, and then that will go for approval.
Diolch yn fawr, Chris, and thank the team, please, on our behalf, will you, for all the work that they're undertaking in this area. So the committee is being asked to note the Welsh Language Standards Report. And now on to closing matters. I will discuss the highlight report and its contents outside this meeting, given where we are time-wise. Not aware of any other urgent business. So can I use this opportunity to thank my colleagues, both internally within DHCW, but also particularly to Audit Wales colleagues as well for their contributions today. Always a pleasure to have you here, as well as internal audit. Thank you all for your contributions in what has been a very productive meeting. The date of our next scheduled quarterly meeting is July the 14th, but of course, as we've already discussed, there will be other meetings to sign off the annual accounts in advance of that date. Diolch yn fawr I chi, thank you all, and we'll join our colleagues who are due to attend the private session